I'm going to demonstrate how to read from a file using the scanner class. The scanner class is actually the easiest way to read from a file in Java. It's great if you just got to read some content out. You can read it, file, and put into your program. So this example, all the examples I'm going to do are going to be inside of the Dropbox folder that I'm sharing with you guys. So if you look under Workspace Fall 2020, this is where I'm going to have my examples. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I have this project. I haven't actually added any files to it. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and just add a text file. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to file, and I'm going to go ahead and name this, let's see, data.text. Okay, press enter, and then in data.text, what I'm going to do is just put some information in here. Let's just say that I'm going to use, let's see, we'll just have some names inside of this. So we'll say John, Mike, Angel, Barbara, and Frank. All right, so we have 5 names in this file, and IntelliJ automatically saves, so I don't have to save this file. So I'm gonna come over to my source folder. I'm going to go ahead and add a new class. And this is just going to be our driver class. So we can just name it whatever. I'll just call this one test. And inside of this class, I'll go ahead and put in the main method. Okay, so some things that we're going to use to read this file is the scanner class. So I'm going to need to import java.util.scanner. Okay, so I'm going to instantiate my scanner object, and I'll call this one file scan. It's going to be equal to new scanner. All right, so the scanner can actually listen to many different things. It can listen to your keyboard, it can listen to a string, and it can also listen to a file. So what I need to do is I need to create a file object and pass it to the scanner class. And the way we do that is just declare file. And I'll just say, call this one data file is equal to new file. And inside of this file, we're going to put the path and also the file name of the file that we want to read. So I'm going to put data.text, and I'm going to hover over this, press Alt and enter. And let's see, what the heck, import class. In the Java, it's Java IO file. Okay, so I'm going to pass this data file to the scanner class. Okay, now if you look at the scanner constructor, it's actually red. And what's happening here is this will throw an exception if it cannot find the file. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out. So we're going to talk about exceptions in chapter 11. It's actually going to be something that I'm going to assign for you guys to go do. But in the meantime, we need to start getting comfortable with handling exceptions. I'm not really going to test you guys on that until the final exam. So for now, the easiest thing you can do is just kind of hover over this scanner. We'll actually highlight it and click on this red light bulb and add exception to method signature, or you can surround with try catch. Okay, so we add the exception to method signature. It's going to put the exception on the main method. So it's basically going to throw an exception to the JRE. And since we're not really handling this exception in the JRE, the program is going to essentially just crash if this data file does not exist. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and run this. If you look at your output console, it finished without any problems. I didn't print anything out to the screen, but let's just say I had a file and I just gave it some weird name. And this file does not exist in this project. Data.text exists, but this file name doesn't. So now when I run this, I get this exception. It's telling you exactly what happened. It's saying exception in main thread, file not found exception, meaning it couldn't find that file, so it couldn't even bring it into the scanner object so that we can start using it to read the lines. So that's one of the options, is to add the method signature to your main method, or the other one is to surround this with a try catch. Okay, so I can highlight this, click on this red button, and then surround with try catch. Okay, so here they're printing out the stack trace. The stack trace is basically like, you know, the list of commands or method calls that failed. Okay, but what I want to do is just put a nice little error message that says could not find file, and then maybe even throw in the name of the file, which would be in data. I think it's just get name. Yeah, there we go, get name. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and run this again. At this time, we're not gonna find this file, and it's telling us cannot find file, and then the name of the file that we're looking for. Okay, so now I'm gonna come up here, I'm gonna change this to data. Data actually exists, so that means we're gonna be inside of this try, and all we're gonna do is just create the object and like not do much else after that. But I'm going to run it just to make sure that it runs okay. And it ran without throwing an error. So now what I'm going to do is I need to read every line of this file. Okay, so the scanner has what we call an iterator, and we talked about iterators, or we should have. At least the book talks about iterators, and dang, I forgot. Maybe chapter 5 talks about iterators. So an iterator is just basically just an interface that allows that an interface that a class will implement, and it basically implements these methods so that we can like grab the next item like inside of a container. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well, while file scan dot has next. Okay, so this is going to return true if there's a next line. Okay, I'm going to change this to has next line. Okay, so if we have a next line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to extract that line out by saying string line is equal to file scan dot next line. And then I'm going to say system dot out dot print line, and I'm going to print out the line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run this. And you can see that I was able to read the contents of the file. So it's pretty simple. There's pretty powerful stuff that you can do here. Now, one of the examples, or actually a lot of times what we see the way these files use is just like putting just generic data inside of here separated by some type of delimiter. So if I'm going to come over here to the data.txt, and let's just say for this particular file format, I'm going to have the name, and I'm going to have grades, or yeah, grades. So we'll just say like 78, 84, 85. Dang, I keep putting a space just from, it's just a habit. I'm going to go ahead and just copy all of this, paste, 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 paste. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, since I know the format of this file, now in my program, I know that I can grab a line, and then I can go ahead and parse out on these commas here, and just like grab the data. So I can like grab a string for the name, and then an integer, maybe they should be floats because they're grades, but I made them all the same. I just want to kind of just do a proof of concept. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to well, first let's just run this really quick. I'm going to run it, and then you can see there's my data. So what I want to do inside of this loop is just parse out this information and then just do something with it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is inside of this line, I'm going to go ahead and just make another scanner, and I'm going to call this one line scan. Okay, line scan is going to be equal to new scanner. And I'm going to go ahead and pass in the line, and yeah, and then I can parse this out. One of the important things that you should probably do, and I forgot to do this, is when you read a file, you should also close the file. So you're closing like the stream of the connection to that file. So over here, like we opened it and now we want to close it because we don't need it anymore. We're done with it. So what I'm going to do is over here in my line scan, I'm essentially just going to like parse out the data based off of that that comma. Now I'm going to have to set my delimiter to a comma. So I'm going to go ahead over here and says, dang, I forgot the name of it. Use delimiter. Yeah, use delimiter. And I believe I just put a comma right here. Okay. And I can do the same thing here. Like there's several things you can do here. I can make like another while. Okay. And I could say something like line scan dot has next. Okay, and then I'll put like a tab, that way it's tabbed in, and the data that we're getting, which is line scan dot next. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and run this. Okay, and you can see that we had a while loop instead of while loop. So here's the line, and then I use another scanner to kind of parse up this line. So I was actually taking the tokens off of this line. I made my delimiter that comma right there. So I have like 4 tokens in here. I have a string here, string here, string here, and a string here. Now, because I know these are integers or numeric values, since I know the file of that format, I can go ahead and, for those particular spots, instead of using next, I can use next int. So what I want to do is I want to do something a little more, I guess, creative. So I'm going to come over here to my source, and I'm going to make a new class, and I'm going to call this one student. Okay, and my student class is going to have a private string, dang it, and we'll just say name, and then we'll have a private, we'll say it's a float, and we'll say the float is going to be, I guess, test grades. We'll say test 1, test 2, test 3. Okay, and we can have a constructor. Let me generate a constructor. So my constructor is going to take in all these values. Hit OK, and I'm going to go ahead and just auto-generate the getters and setters. So I'm going to generate getters and setters. Let's get all of them, and let's go ahead and generate the toString. And let's go ahead and make a method that's going to give us our test average. So I'll say public float, calculate test KVG, and it's simply going to return the sum of test 1 plus test 2, plus test 3, all divided by the number of tests that I have, which is 3. Okay, and that's going to give me my test average. All right, I could probably make an equals method, like if I want to do some type of comparison. All right, so I'm going to hop back over to my test. All right, so basically what I'm going to do is I want to write a program that is going to read student data from a file called data.txt and then load it into a list of students that I can then use to look at the averages or update grades or just do something fun. Okay, so I'm going to, so all, like what's right there is everything I need to actually read the file, but where I'm going to keep my data is inside of a list, and I'm going to call this actually is going to hold a student object, and this is going to be a list of students. So we'll just say student list. Okay, sure, student list, and then I'll say like new array list and student. All right, so I don't know if this is confusing. I know we talked about array list in chapter 5. I'm not sure if we talked about actual list. So essentially, like an array list is a list. A list is an interface for multiple different types of lists. I'm going to go and just change this to an array list just to avoid the confusion. Okay, so I have my list that's currently empty, has no students in it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to load student data into list. Okay, actually, let me take that back. How about let's say create student object from data. Okay, and then the next thing I want to do is load student into list. All right, so what I'm going to do is, okay, this is doing the has next. All right, I'm going to go ahead, since I know that my data is a name and 3 test grades, I don't really need a while loop right here. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of this. Okay, and I can just assume that the student, okay, this is going to be the student that I'm going to load, is going to have data at all of those spots. Okay, so I could just do like a simple line scan next for the name, line scan next float for the first test grade, line scan next float for the second test grade, line scan next float for the third test grade. All right, oops, what the heck. All right, so I basically just created a student object. This object only exists like right now inside of this in this while loop right here. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just for debugging purposes, I'm just going to go ahead and print out the student, and then the next thing I'm going to do is load the student into my list. So I'm going to come over here and say my student list, go ahead and add this student. All right, perfect. So we're going to basically iterate through those lines inside of this while loop, and we're going to basically load up this list. And then once we're outside of this while loop, we can close that file, and I can just say something like, what can I say? I can do a loop. I could just make a for each loop. For each, dang, I hate it. It puts it on different lines. What's up with that? All right, so I'll say student and student inside of student list. Then I can just do system.out, the print line, and I can do something like a nice format, maybe, you know, like have some dashes right here. Okay, and like name. Okay, let me use a printf. So I do %s/new line test 1, test 2, test 3, test average. So it'd be test 1, test 2, test 3, test average. All right, and these are floats, not strings. So I'm gonna come over here and just say student dot get name, student dot get test 1, copy. Great, my setup. All right, calculate test average. All right, so let's just kind of just talk about what I just did. I know it's kind of a lot to digest, especially if you're new to all this. So initially I explained that we were reading a file, but then I went ahead and added these like data to this file that is separated by these commas. So I'm scanning every line, okay, and I'm grabbing the line and I'm putting it into string line. I'm printing out the line. I guess I don't really need to do that anymore. Then I'm making another scanner to actually parse out the line, and I set the delimiter to a comma. So it's going to parse on those commas. And then I'm making a student object. And since I know that every line is going to have 4 tokens, the first token is going to be a string. The second is a float. Actually, it's an integer, but I want it to be a float because it's a test grade. That way I can go back in there and put like decimal points if I need to. So I know this is a string, this one's a float, this one's a float, this one's a float. Those are the tokens of that one line. I put them into a student object. I go ahead and I print out the student object just for debugging purposes, and then I add the student to a list. And then once I'm done loading my list, I go ahead and I iterate through my list and I print out the data for the student. Okay, it's pretty simple. All this is just using a scanner class to read from a file. So I run, and then you can see those are all my students that I loaded, right? So like this is where I was doing my debugging. Okay, now everybody has the same test average because I just use the same grades for everybody. But here's John, here's Mike, here's Angel, and Barbara and Frank. All right, so we took that data and we loaded it. I'm gonna do another example. Dang, I should have named this I should just name this like read a file with the scanner. I wonder if I can still change this. All right, well, I'll figure that out, and I'm gonna do another example where I actually read and write to a file using a different class, not using the scanner class.